Qatar is not without fault. Women's rights and gay rights are restricted by Western standards. Migrant workers have indisputably been treated badly.
There should be a universally accepted standards for human rights. It's not like the European standards or the American standards or the African standards. Human rights is human right. Migrant rights or rights for migrant workers should be rights for migrant workers. There shouldn't be a standard set for different set of people. And before we get into this conversation or before I react to this video by Piers Morgan, I have to let you guys know that Piers is someone I admire and Piers is someone I have followed for a very long time. I can remember many years before when he was still on the popular show, is it Good Morning Britain? Yeah, Good Morning Britain. He was a co-host on that show. So I have watched him for a very long time when he had problem on the show, when he challenged Meghan Markle about her mental health issue, blah, 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 blah. And then a day when he walked out of stage and stuff like that. You know, I have really followed him. So it's someone I, most of the times, watch his show. And like this present one, Piers Morgan Uncensored, I think it's a very interesting show. And I really like to watch the show because I'm someone who loves stuff like this. I had one problem with him. He did not like giving people the time to express themselves. Okay, like if he asks a question and when you are trying to respond to the question, he just cut in and start saying something else or and start asking another question, which I felt like it was really unprofessional. But let's continue.
But those statements apply to many of the countries around the world, including many competing in this tournament, and by many nations who've hosted major sporting events without anything like the furore that's kicked off about Qatar.
Yeah, actually, there are many countries with very, very terrible human rights records. That's for sure. There are many countries, but in the Middle East, in Africa, I think even in Asia, there are many countries that have a terrible human rights record. That's for sure. But I think that events like this one also help help human rights organizations create more awareness about a given problem in the hope that it could be solved, because when all eyes are on you, that is the time people can really point out some things that you are doing which are not good, in hopes that you also take a deeper look into them and try to fix them. So I think that the critique of Qatar is warranted because it's not like Qatar is an angel who is not doing anything wrong and people are just out there trying to critique Qatar. That's not what I think. I think Qatar is doing things that warrant all the critique that Qatar is getting. And these critiques helps Qatar improve. So I think that this World Cup has helped Qatar improve in so many things. All the criticism are justified.
We seem to have forgotten in England that in 1966, when we hosted and won the World Cup, it was illegal to be gay in our country. Moral halos appear to have slipped over some people's eyes.
The fact that in 1966, when England hosted the World Cup, being gay in England was still a criminal offense doesn't mean that people cannot criticize other countries that still criminalize same-sex activities. It's like you're saying that because many years back, slavery was legal in the Middle East and in America, people shouldn't criticize modern slave trade. For the fact that people didn't critique 10 years ago doesn't mean they cannot critique now. So that's not how things really work.
And obscured some rather salient facts. For example, there's 12% of the population here are native Qataris, something we in the supposedly sophisticated West would never tolerate.
Many of the people in Qatar are foreigners. Like 12% are Qataris and like 88% are foreigners. But you should remember, right, the Qataris need those foreigners to carry out almost everything, right? They really need them It's not like in other countries. I'm not against migration. In fact, I support migration. But my point is, if you say that people shouldn't critique Qatar because Qatar has a lot of foreigners perform a service that Qatar needs, and that is why Qatar allows them to be there. Any day, anytime that Qatar find out that they don't need those 88%, they will kick them all out. That's the point I'm trying to make, okay?
But the reason they're here in the first place is because the wages they earn are life-changing. And the global scrutiny of the World Cup has at least led to reforms in labour laws here. That will be an important legacy, and one massively lacking after 2 Olympic Games in China and a World Cup in Russia.
You see, his point here was that people didn't criticize China and Russia enough, but they did. Okay, people did criticize, and there was a lot of critique during the Olympic Games in China and also the World Cup in Russia. They did do that. So, but even if they didn't do that, let's put that aside. Okay, let's say, for example, for the sake of argument, they did not. All the human rights groups, all the people criticizing Qatar did not criticize China or Russia. That was about 4 years ago, and maybe about Beijing Olympic game was like in 2008. I should be like 2018, about 12 years ago or 14 years ago. Yeah. So my point still is the fact that they didn't criticize people 10 years ago does not necessarily mean that they cannot criticize people now when there is a problem that needs to be solved. Now, there's something we must understand about why people are criticizing Qatar. There is a problem that people have identified, and people are trying to call the attention of the Qatari authorities so that they can fix it. And bear in mind, all those people who are calling the attention, all those people who are criticizing Qatar are not going to benefit when these laws are being changed or when these things are being fixed. Do you know who are going to benefit? The migrant workers will benefit. The LGBT plus people will benefit. But most of these people who are criticizing Qatar, most of these NGOs who have documented all the human rights abuses in Qatar, many of those people live in the Western world, maybe in England, in America, in Canada. They do not ever dream of going to stay in Qatar. They will never be migrant workers in Qatar. So it's not like they have any motive to do it. Okay. But on the other hand, the Qatari authorities do not want to change things because they have a motive. They like it the way it is. Because bear in mind, it doesn't affect the Qataris. It doesn't affect them. It affects the migrant workers.